So if you've ever done a video of yourself, you're doing a vlog or something, and after a while you realize that you've been talking to yourself because you never hit that record button, that is okay. You're also welcome to this video. So what's up guys, my name is Herman and today I'm going to be running you through a couple of things. We understand that live streaming became increasingly popular in this time, and that's why I decided to dedicate this video specifically to two things. So the first thing that I'll share with you is if you maybe want to start streaming but you don't know where to start, I'm going to show you what you need, and I'm also going to run you through what I believe that you need to keep in your head when you want to make a decision with purchasing a camera, something that's a little bit more future-proof. The second thing that we're going to be running through is if you have a Sony camera, I'm going to flip and save you money. So stay tuned for that one. So let's get into it. What are the three basic things that you need to start streaming online? You need a camera, you need a capture card device, and you need a computer. So it's also important to understand actually how this relationship works together. So this can actually be compared to sending a handwritten letter to somebody. So for my handwritten letter, I actually need a good story. So this is where your camera comes in. Now, I need Postnet to do their job. They need to send my letter out. So this is the central point of distribution for my letter, right? That's the same role that your computer plays. Your computer takes that file and it is the central point of distribution for that file to go to your viewer. Now that you understand the fundamentals of how these things work together, it is also important to understand the mindset that you need to have when purchasing your first camera. Cameras. Why is it important to talk about cameras? Because cameras will establish your viewer's first impression about your live stream. So as emphasized, it is very important when you make a decision to get a camera that you don't get a camera that's going to output crappy footage. Like your dedicated laptop webcam that even makes Zoom meetings look like junk. Or getting yourself a dedicated external webcam that puts out shockingly inconsistent color balance and the device itself looks like Mike's Wazowski. And definitely not your dad's camera that was bought back in 2000 that is worse than your grandfather trying to answer an incoming call. So now let's get to a great part of this talk, is using your Sony camera to stream online without having a capture card device. So let's quickly understand why it's important to be able to stream without a capture card device. Live streaming became ridiculously popular and this results in two major headaches. The first thing is because of this high demand, unfortunately everybody is buying these things and they just end up being super rare and it's so difficult to find them in stock. The second thing is if you actually do manage to find them, they are flippin' expensive. I've seen people spend up to 5 grand on one capture card device. Now just to put this into perspective for you, just before the lockdown happened in South Africa, these devices were up to 50% cheaper than what they are now. Now that might sound like bad news, but I also have some good news. I'll share 3 things that you can use to overcome this. You need your Sony camera, you need a cable, you need 2 pieces of software. So let's look at the first point, your Sony camera. So what Sony camera can you actually use? You can use your RX series, A5000, A6000, A7 or A9 series cameras. So now that you have your Sony camera, you just need a cable. So the first cable that I'm going to be talking about is the Microusb cable. The Microusb cable is a cable that is usable across all these camera models. But if you have an A7 series or up, so A7 series or A9 series, this means you can also use a USB-C cable. I've actually used both of these cables and it seems there's no difference in performance. What is, however, a little bit more important is the fact that you get a data cable. Don't just get any cable, this actually does make a difference in the speed and the feed. So USB cables, you can find these ridiculously cheap. I've found them for as cheap as 65 bucks. That is crazy cheap. With the micro USB cables, same thing. Now if you don't have one of these, it's a little bit sad, but it's okay, you can still find them for 80 bucks. So you have your Sony camera, you have your cable, now we're left with one more thing. There's actually 2 pieces of software. The first one is called Obs Studio. Obs Studio is free, it is super easy to use, and it's incredibly powerful. So go ahead and download the software. The second piece of software that you need is called Imaging Edge by Sony. This free software is specifically made for tethering, for editing, and for viewing. For quick download, you can just head over to imagingedge.sony.net. It will redirect you to a window or to a page where you can download it for cell phone and also for desktop. What we're going to be looking at specifically now is obviously desktop. So there you have it. Just your Sony camera, the cable that you need, and the 2 pieces of software. Now let's quickly look at setting these up. The first step is ridiculously obvious. You just need to make sure that the cable is plugged into your camera and that it's also plugged into your computer. I do, however, have to mention that I do recommend USB 3 and not normal USB. You obviously also need to ensure that your camera is on. Don't worry about the shooting mode of your camera just yet, we'll get to that. Now that your camera is on and plugged in, let's get it ready for connection. The first thing that you want to do is just make sure that you turn off mobile connection. Head on over to the Green Network main page, go down to Control with Smartphone and switch it off, as this will stop you from connecting to your computer. Now, navigate to the yellow setup menu. Sub-scroll to setup for or search for the USB connection and change it to be PC remote. Just a quick hint, you can actually use your function button to scroll through the main menus more efficiently on most of the newer full frame models. And just like that, your camera is ready for connection. Now we can start looking at software. We'll start off with remote from Imaging Edge. Now just for your reference, if you run this program from something like a hard drive and you run it also from a shortcut, that means your footage is going to be a little bit more choppy. So I do suggest that you run the application straight from your desktop without using a shortcut. So going straight to the file location. At least that was in my experience. So let's open up the software from our computer. So the first thing that we want to do is obviously open up our Imaging Edge. So I have it here on my desktop. Let me just go in there. Okay, so the first thing that should pop up if your camera is switched on is the camera. So I'm using the A6100 and let's quickly look at the settings. Double click on that little sucker. Okay, so remote is open. Let me quickly take you through a couple of these settings. Let's see what they do. So let's start with the first one. I'm just going to minimize all of this. The first one is shooting. Okay, so the thing that I'm going to be focusing on most is this one. This button, people get quite confused. It is not the switch between manual focus and autofocus. It is actually halfway pressing down the focus button or not. Okay, so if you don't have pre-autofocus switched on, nothing's really going to happen if that's switched off. If you switch it on, however, now it's focusing continuously, like you have your focus button held down all the time, because my camera is currently on autofocus continuous, just so that you know. So you can see here on the feed, let me just hide my face because it's on face tracking. It will just go ahead and track the hand, right? Because it's active at the moment. I can switch that off. Now do take note that this is in manual mode in the A6100. Okay, so if I go ahead and switch this A6100 over to video mode, switch it over, there you go. The feed changes quite drastically, number one, and number two, you'll see now I don't have that active anymore because now the focus is continuously working in AFC, right? So it's already, there we go. It's already active and it reacts like the video reacts normally in Sony cameras. So I don't know what you prefer. I'll go through the benefits of both. So let's just switch back to photo mode, manual. Okay, you'll see here my aspect ratio obviously changes, which is because of imagery. Okay, so 4:3 versus 16:9, you understand that. Let me quickly go into the next one. Mode, normal in interval shooting. This is just a function that you won't really be using it for live streaming. So let's head over to your main settings. Of course, you can change your exposure settings. Then under sub settings, you can change a lot of these things that won't matter for live streaming, so don't need to worry about that. Focusing, this is where you will switch between manual focus and autofocus, right? Histogram, I don't know if you really want to use this. And save settings is just your file naming and all of that stuff. Also not something that you're going to be using for live streaming. Now let's switch over again to video. So instantly 16:9 frame, obviously. And you'll notice that it seems almost like the dynamic range is a little bit more. At least that is what it feels like to me. Now, because I shoot with the A6100 at the moment, I don't have picture profiles. So it really depends on what your settings will be in your camera as well. And again, the same things apply across the board now. Okay, so just for the sake of the frame, I'm gonna go to manual because my head's chopped off. And this is where we can go ahead and open up OBS Studio. Let's get it running. So, now that we have OBS open, there's a bunch of things that you need to know. The first thing is your scenes and your sources. Your scenes is pretty much just what is going to be active. Your sources is where the information comes from for that scene to be active from. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is create a scene. Usually this won't be there, so I'm just gonna go ahead and rename it. Well, let's use this one. We'll call it full screen as it already is. Now I want to add a source for this scene. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to window capture. Okay, so let's call this A6100 live stream. There we go. There you can see it automatically picks up a window that's open. So yes, let's go to remote. I don't need my calculator. Capture mates, this, you don't really need to do this. Capture cursor, I don't think you're gonna need it anyway, so you can just ignore that. I'll just switch it up for the sake of it. Okay, now you'll see that this will come up. You can manipulate this as much as you want. I just noticed something, my hands are in focus, my face is not in focus. So let's just head over back here and we hit that button so it can focus there. Let's go back to OBS. Now I want to resize this, right? So the first thing that you'll notice, it's quite choppy and there's a slight lag. So I'll get to that in a second. So if you don't hold the Alt key, you can just go ahead and resize this. This I will show in a second why it's important. And then if you hit the Alt key, you can just crop the actual frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Now, depending on what you're live streaming for, this is gonna make a difference, of course, because now I don't have a full screen, but I can resize it to be a full screen. It's just not, I'm gonna have 4K quality and all of that stuff that you can have with a capture card device. So that is one of the downsides of actually not having a capture card device to stream with. So you can resize like you can see. Now let's get into another way that people will use this, which is probably for stuff like gaming. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new scene that's gonna called that we are going to call gaming. Okay, so then I want to do an image because I don't have video at the moment. Let's call this COD Warzone, Call of Duty Warzone, right? Now I need to find that image. So I've sourced my image. Let's bring the image in. Let's just make this full screen as well, so as if you are gaming. Now if you're a gamer and you also want to add your image in here, this is where you'll add another source. Okay, so this you will go again to window capture. Okay, my face, right? And yeah, this is actually what I want to use. Let's just say, no, I don't want to capture the cursor. And let's first crop this in to the frame that I wanted, which I would say, depending on what you are gaming and that kind of stuff, it's going to be a little bit different. Oh, let me just click here again. Let's say that is what you dig. It's fine. Now I will just go ahead and resize this, and there you go. And that is pretty much what I would do then. If I'm streaming games or something like that, this is the way that you'll set it up. Now let's quickly get to the slight lag. Now if you use an external mic or something like your computer as a microphone or something like that, this is where you need to go here at the bottom into your mix/aux or wherever your audio is coming from, and you're just going to add a slight delay, but this is going to take some testing. So if you go there, you go to Advanced Audio Properties, you'll see here, it depends now from what your audio is coming from, but here you can see I have a sync offset, 22 milliseconds, right? This is what I have found works best for me. So my suggestion is that you do some tests, let somebody else watch your stream when you do a test, and you see where they can link up properly, because the moment your audio and your visuals meet up, that slight lag that you have doesn't even make a difference. You can't really see it. I mean, you will always have a little bit of that when it comes to live streaming anyway. There you have it, guys. That is streaming without having a capture card device using your Sony camera. Now your next question, do I think it's necessary to get a capture card device in the long run? Yes, I actually do. So I'm not leaning away from the idea of a capture card device. I'm just opening up the ideas that you can actually stream without it. And I don't want it to be something that's going to stop you from producing online content. So this brings me to my second part. When you decide to actually get a camera, it's a good idea to get a camera that is going to be future-proof. So do you need to buy a professional camera? No, you can buy an entry-level APS-C camera. The issue with investing into a little bit more of an entry-level camera is that it leaves a lot to be desired. And there's a bunch of things that I think is key focuses when investing specifically into cameras, that you probably also want to be using it for multiple other purposes. And that's where I think that Sony have nailed this one very, very well. In fact, actually just today I found a video online where a guy was describing that he was still using his Sony a5000 camera. That is a super old camera, and he made it very clear that most camera brands still didn't catch up to the quality of that camera. And that is actually the camera that I want to be talking about today. Is a camera step up of that step up. That is the Sony a6100. So the a6100 is actually considered as an entry-level camera of Sony, but the technology in this camera is enough for you to realize that most of the professional cameras have not even caught up to this technology yet. I would actually go so far to say that this camera is a complete show-off. I will highlight some of these features now. So point number one, the world's fastest autofocus. The a6100 together with the a6400 actually has the fastest autofocusing speed on the planet at 0.02 seconds. That is incredibly fast. Competition had the record at 0.06 seconds just before the a6100 and a6400 came out. So what does this mean? Let's take the 0.06 seconds of the competition and we compare that to the fastest recorded speed made on a racetrack by Pablo Juan Montoya at 372.6 kilometers per hour, which basically means from Pretoria to Cape Town, he can reach it in 3 hours and 55 minutes. Now let's say Sony was the new racer, the a6100 racer. The a6100 racer can make that in 2 hours and 57 minutes. That's almost an hour difference. And that is the difference between the competition's best autofocus versus Sony's best autofocus. The point actually just is that even the a6100 as an entry-level camera or an entry-level APS-C camera has the fastest autofocusing speed on the planet. So your focusing is not going to be outdated anytime soon. Number two, real-time face and eye autofocus tracking that actually works. This is the part of Sony that is just cheating. Face and eye tracking is just incredible on these cameras. With the help of the new processors, these cameras have the ability to track in real time using artificial intelligence. What this means in layman's terms is just basically the moment this camera locks onto the eye or onto the face, it will not lose the focus. It will keep on tracking and keep the focus. And just for the record, this is actually by far the most advanced autofocus tracking system in any camera system. 6K downscale to 4K, giving you the best 4K that's out there. So 4K on the a6100 is actually 6K downscaled to 4K, which just basically means that there's no 4K like Sony 4K. Sony is actually known to have the sharpest 4K footage there is. Tremendous customizability. So with the a6100 body, there's actually 8 customizable buttons on the body itself. Now these buttons are fully customizable and you can assign them to pretty much anything. What is also cool about this is that you can set up these buttons differently for video, images and viewer at the same time. Number 5, a very fun flip-up screen The 180-degree flip-up screen is pretty much just fun. This is all it is. I mean, of course, recording yourself, being able to see yourself is a huge advantage, specifically if we're talking about the live streaming. This also means that wherever you go, you can actually do vlogging with this camera. This comes back to the message that I'm busy sharing, which is making this camera more future-proof. And number 6, built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth that takes sharing to the next level. So these are just some of the key features that I believe just puts the Sony a6100 in a different league. I can guarantee you from these settings, this camera is not going to go out of fashion anytime soon, and in my opinion is the best solution for the most future-proof setup that you can get at the moment. So before we get to saving you money, let's quickly revise on the things that we touched on. So the first thing that I want you to remember is just that first impressions last. You need to understand, the camera plays a very big role in the first impression that you will leave your viewer with. So don't think just any camera, think future-proof. So what is my future-proof suggestion? The a6100. So let's look at the key points of the a6100. The world's fastest autofocus, real-time eye autofocus, the best 4K, customizability, the flip-up screen, and connectivity. So just to revise in general as well, there is 3 things that I'm leaving you with ultimately. The first thing is what you actually need to be streaming online, and if you consider a camera, how you need to consider that camera. The second thing was what camera I actually recommend as a future-proof solution in the longer run. And the last thing is just streaming online using your Sony camera without having a capture card device. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on this one, and I also want to say a big thanks to Sony for putting out so much content for us to consume. I mean, there's so many videos, you can just go check it out on the Alpha Universe if you scroll up and down of all the pre-recorded content that's already produced and put up. And I also want to encourage you to stay tuned because there's even more coming in the next couple of months. Lastly, if you would like to follow Sony, I invite you to go check them out at Sony Alpha SA. Thanks guys, have a freaking great day.